Hi everyone, this is Paul here from the Magdalene Centre. Today I'm doing the astrology report for the week commencing the 30th of January. I'll be outlining some key aspects and transits taking place this week and giving an overview of what it means. Before I do that, I just want to clarify, as I always do, that the astrology doesn't control our lives. It gives us a framework to help us understand what the energies around us doing, what are the key lessons to be learning at this time, and where the opportunities for growth. But for anything to actually change, we have to participate in the process, we have to take responsibility for ourselves and our actions, and we have to want to make things change, or make things happen, and have a desire to operate in divine flow rather than trying to do things based on self-interest and trying to make things happen our way. Now, in terms of the aspects this week, I'll begin with the moon as usual. We start off with her in Sagittarius, so this is a time where there's that often emotional desire for expanding the mind and seeking freedom and exploring new ideals, and it's embracing that adventurous kind of spirit. On Friday she'll enter Capricorn, so this would be a time where it's that you need to take responsibility, to establish order, and it's about taking responsibility for every aspect of our lives. So if we don't like the way our lives are unfolding, it's up to us to make the changes necessary. And there's also time for dealing with practical concerns in that respect. Then on Sunday she'll enter Aquarius, so this is a time where we may feel that need to kind of connect with our communities, to also look at what ideals are we seeking to accomplish and what are we trying to achieve, and how can we work together in groups to achieve that. This ties in nicely with the fact that we've got the new moon on Monday, so this particular lunation gives us an opportunity to set new intentions in areas dealing with Aquarius. So it could be that there's a new set of ideals that we want to manifest in our lives. It could be that there's certain skill sets we can bring to our community and want to try and become more community orientated and see how we can use our own skill sets for the benefit of the community. But it's also looking at, it's that self-realisation, so it's seeing where do we need to strip away social conditioning, where do we have a fear of separating from the crowd, or where do we go follow the flow of the crowd rather than following divine flow. But at the same time it's also looking at where do we have a need to be non-conformist, so where do we tend to act out the need for, or that individuating energy in a non-conformational way, so we engage in rebellion or rebelliousness rather than actual personal transformation, self-realisation. In terms of the other aspects this week, we've got a few of them. So on Wednesday itself, we've got a conjunction between the Sun and Mercury. So this is Mercury's behind the Sun, but symbolically it's illuminating the intellect, it's shining a light on it. But it's also looking at how do our thought patterns influence our sense of who we are, our understanding of who we are. What is our mental understanding of our sense of identity? And it's shining a light on these thought patterns to see, are they actually reflective of who we are, or is it we've submitted, or we've inadvertently suppressed our sense of who we are based on our own thinking. On Thursday we'll have a sextile between Saturn and Neptune, so they're both in the home sign, so both of them are in full strength. Saturn is all about that establishing order, is about learning to live in alignment with the divine order, so it deals with karma basically, and it deals with the need to take personal responsibility for who we are, what we say and what we do. And it's recognising that for us to achieve anything, we have to develop self-control, we have to have self-discipline, we need to have patience, and we need to have a strong sense of work ethic, and we need to make sure that what we're doing is honest and based on truth as best we know it, and seeking to operate within the framework of spiritual law. Otherwise we create karma for ourselves. Neptune, on the other hand, is in Pisces, and this is about that universal consciousness. It's about that surrender to source. It's about the letting go of everything, letting go of attachments. But for this to happen, we have to embrace the higher side of Pisces, which is achieved through meditation. So this is things like pure consciousness of that feeling of bliss, of having gratitude, of having compassion and empathy for one another. But with the sextile between Saturn and Neptune, this reminds us that it's not enough to have these feelings of compassion or to have this connection with all that is. Saturn reminds us that we have to be practical about it, we have to be realistic with it, and we have to be grounded. So it's not enough to have all these fantastic visions, all these insights. It means nothing if we don't embody it. So this aspect is a reminder to focus our energies to that one-pointedness and make sure that we ground that spiritual insight into our day-to-day living through living out our truths. On Friday, Vesta moves into Pisces, so this is a rather diffused energy, so in order to focus it, we may find it helpful to channel that devotional energy of Vesta into helping others, but obviously maintaining boundaries so that we don't just enable people to be lazy and allow them to avoid their growth. So we need to avoid enabling people to maintain dysfunctional behaviours. And it's also, we need to be mindful that we don't engage in martyrdom, we don't indulge in victim mentality. So this is where service as an antidote to suffering can come in to help us in that respect. So it's devotion to, and spiritual devotion is also key, because it's through meditation that the mind can be focused, and all that's kind of scattered energy Pisces can be concentrated and channeled into acts of service to help other people, as long as it's guided by empathy and compassion whilst maintaining boundaries, rather than doing it in order to kind of make ourselves look like a martyr ourselves and do things but do it begrudgingly, as it were. On Saturday, we have a strong aspect between Mars and Pluto. So Mars in Aries is square to Pluto in Capricorn. The two planets are related in that they both symbolise different functions but at different levels of experience. So Mars is the more personal, Pluto is the transpersonal, but where Mars is action, drive and assertiveness, Pluto deals with pure power and also highlights where we have a need to try and control things. Now, the only thing we can control is ourselves, so that's where that control side of Pluto needs to be applied. But with this square between Mars and Pluto, we need to be mindful of power dynamics, we need to be mindful of conflict with other people, but we also need to be mindful of where we fear to take action, or we have a fear of power that causes us to not take action. Now, we may project this as other people, as experiencing other people as powerful authority figures, and therefore we project our own power onto them rather than owning it within ourselves. Or we could constantly give up our power to avoid facing that fear. But with Pluto and with Mars together, it's about transforming those actions and desires, it's about purifying them. So this requires that we be honest with ourselves and we face our own shadow in the process, because we can't, if we want this to Pluto demands transformation at the end of the day, and the liberation of consciousness from selfish desires or just motivated by self-interest, and it demands that we look at the bigger picture and we we empower ourselves so that we can empower others. So this is the Phoenix level of Pluto. It's the ability to rise above personal desires and surrender the ones that don't empower ourselves and others, and allow that fire transformation to burn through our desires, and to recognise where actions that may seem to be pure are actually driven by personal self-interest. So we have to be truly honest with ourselves here and be honest about where our shadow is pulling the strings calling the shots, rather than our conscious self, because our actions and desires need to be guided by higher wisdom, but we also need to have a true understanding of our real motivations for doing things. And if these motivations are not pure, they need to be purged from the psyche through surrendering them and embracing a higher level of understanding and being willing to surrender to the mysteries of God, if you like, or surrender to the universal consciousness, whatever terms you feel most comfortable with. But it requires we come to that place of conscious surrender where we let go of the need to try and control other people, and instead we empower ourselves through facing our own internal triggers and deactivating them through accepting them and loving those areas where the wounds are. And through this, the wounds are cleansed, they're healed, and those triggers are deactivated, so people can't push our buttons anymore in those particular areas. And the last aspect is that Venus is entering Capricorn on Sunday. So with Venus in Capricorn, it's a time where I may value things that are more practical and based more on longevity and stability here. So in terms of our relationships, we may desire more in terms of order, stability, and have a practical focus for them, and to make sure that our relationships have a stable foundation that allows longevity to be achieved. So but one of the things we need to be mindful of is that with Capricorn, one of the themes it can highlight to us is about personal ambition, personal drive. So we need to be mindful that in our relationships we don't just use them as a means to achieve more or accomplish more. We need to make sure that both parties are given the freedom to be themselves, to be who they are, and to also encourage each other to achieve the goals that we set for one another, and to hold each other accountable in our relationships. Now, these could be romantic relationships, it could be friendships, it could be business, but whatever the area is, it's about cultivating personal integrity first. So we need to understand what our own values are before we try and establish anything with other people in that respect. So obviously this is a collective one, so collectively we may value more longevity, and we may seek people who operate with integrity rather than people who are flaky. It's also about valuing the need to take responsibility for ourselves and recognising that true freedom requires responsibility for every aspect of our lives. If we continue to abstain from responsibility and refuse to take responsibility for who we are and what we do, then freedom cannot be achieved, and we just end up creating karma for ourselves. Venus is also about love. So in Capricorn, it could be about the necessity of learning true love, or tough love, which is the setting of boundaries to make it clear what we will accept and what we won't, because we can't truly love someone if we don't set firm boundaries to make it clear what behaviour we're willing to tolerate and what behaviour is damaging and is ultimately going to cause harm for ourselves and harm for the other person. So in Capricorn, it's about learning to set those boundaries in relationships and recognise that setting boundaries is an act of self-love, and it also makes it clear and it's also about setting consequences for what happens if those boundaries are violated, so that we're not all just talk, we're also walking the walk. There's a lot going on this week, but the main things to remember are taking ownership of our own actions, taking ownership of our own thoughts, and making sure that we have a solid foundation of love within ourselves, so love for oneself. This only enables us to love one another, and it's recognising that even if we have spiritual insights or spiritual wisdom gained from meditation, they ultimately mean nothing if we don't apply them in our own lives. So this is a week of, if we want to truly grow, if we truly wish to mature and move forward, then we have to take responsibility for our actions. We have to be honest with ourselves and other people about what our true motivations for doing things are. If those motivations are selfish, or they're not guided by a high level of understanding, or we're seeking control over other people instead of control over our internal responses to situations, then these need to be faced square on, and need to be surrendered to a high level of understanding and a higher power, and instead allow ourselves to surrender the need to control people and control circumstances, and instead learn to control our internal responses to them, so that our actions and desires are then guided by wisdom rather than egoic impulse. and through the grounding of Saturn, any visions that we have at this time are also applied. So I hope this useful guide for the week ahead. Maybe many blessings. Take care.